In 1958, Philip Rodgers, living on the slopes of Sir William Hill near Grindleford in Derbyshire, began to make a series of tape recordings of electronic voice phenomena. However, these were different from the majority of such recordings in that they seemed to be from extraterrestrials rather than disembodied spirits. Even now, when searching for electronic voice phenomena extraterrestrial on YouTube, while I had hundreds of returns, they were all of the first three words, with no extraterrestrial examples. Philip was an accomplished musician who was employed giving lectures and concerts to schools by Sheffield and Derbyshire Education Authority. Ranked in Europe's top 3 recorder players, he regularly broadcasted for the BBC and Radio Iran and travelled to the continent for dates on other networks. However, his sight was very poor, and over the following few years he lost it entirely. He has written of how the tape recordings started. As a boy, I had always been interested in the possibility of life on other planets, but it wasn't until October 1956 that I read George Adamski's second book, Inside the Spaceships. This story, I argued, was either the truth or a pretty fairy tale, and I determined then and there to find out the truth for myself. Almost immediately things began to happen. A couple of weeks after finishing the book, I received a strong verbal hunch to walk up Sir William Hill, a road over a high moorland above our house, at 9 p.m. the following Friday. I set off at about 7:30, and at 9 o'clock was just starting to descend again, after another strong verbal impression that I was not alone and must not give up hope. It pulsated at roughly 10-second intervals, starting with red, then increasing in intensity into magnesium white, then diminishing to red again. At its brightest, it gave me the impression of a cosmic ophthalmoscope, testing the strength of my sight, which is very bad indeed, particularly in the dark. A few weeks later, when walking down the same hill, I was buzzed by a brilliant object which hovered straight in front of me, switching over from white to red, then disappearing. These two experiences convinced me not only that flying saucers existed, but that the intelligence behind them knew quite a bit about me. During the summer of 1957, there were many sightings in the Sheffield area. I had heard a large number of musical notes, apparently produced by invisible flying objects. Sometimes they whizzed through the air at great speed. Sometimes they paced me as I was walking along a country road, and at other times they played scraps of melody, somewhat unrhythmic, but with beautiful bell-like tones. On 24th of November 1957, I had the idea of trying to record one of these songs. Placing the microphone of my Grundig machine on the outer sill of my bed sitting room window, I switched on, ran downstairs and stood in front of the gate. After a few minutes, I was rewarded by a peculiar penetrating whistling sound, seemingly coming from behind the ash tree on the other side of our lane. Immediately I ran indoors and rewound the tape, fully expecting there to be nothing on it. But to my intense relief, there was the sound as clear as a bell. I noticed a peculiar rising double fundamental note, quite alien to any sound I'd heard on Earth. That was my first recording of a sound believed to emanate from outer space. Over the Christmas holiday, I picked up several sounds that were hard to explain, that provided no definite evidence. It was not until February 1958, after a severe blizzard, that a real breakthrough occurred. I recorded several dulcimer-like bleeping sounds, in between which appeared the voice of a small girl shouting, "Howdy!" This pointed to the possibility that whoever the young lady was, she'd learned her English in the States. The next breakthrough occurred on the 21st of March, round about midday. It consisted of a mechanically produced computer voice saying faintly, "Ship is real, people," against a background of clicking, resembling the noise of a typewriter. This was the first of a very few terse messages that I received. I took it to mean that spaceships are real and piloted by people. A few days after receiving the signal in March, I picked up a fantastic series of musical sounds, mostly of instruments unknown to Earth. In particular, they seemed very keen to demonstrate a method of tuning. One appeared to be a violin-like instrument, tuned in fifths, but with no G string, and in place an upper B, a fifth above the top E of a terrestrial violin. In between playing, they keep shouting greetings. There was also a strange harp-like instrument, improvising on strings, tuned to a somewhat modernistic chord. Finally there came what sounded like a goose, flying slowly through the air and emitting a peculiar booming sound as it approached. This, however, resolved into the voice of a woman, with a rich mezzo-contralto quality, and singing a slow type of chant, somewhat eerie, but nevertheless warm, human, and utterly feminine. A careful check revealed that broadcast performances at the time had no connection with these signals. The reader may be amused to learn that a couple of years before I picked up the sound of a wind instrument, very high in pitch, of a completely unknown type. The player demonstrated its natural harmonics and later attempted to play the sea shanty Blow the Man Down, highly appropriate considering I am a professional recorder player. Many of my recordings reveal the space people as having a very real sense of humour. One of my most interesting recordings was obtained about 8:45 p.m. one evening. On the tape can be heard the voices of youngsters making animal noises, chatting, playing and laughing among themselves, as well as blowing an unidentified trumpet-like instrument. A small boy says Sputnik, followed by Anya Pardu, a translation, and a girl of 10 or so says softly Hallelujah, followed by the word Nyanapoda. I checked that no children were in fact playing anywhere about, but did pick up the sound of a terrestrial motorbike, and then a teenage boy shouts a string of words in an unknown language, somewhat in the manner of a news vendor. The phonetic sounds of these words show real similarity, and I did in fact submit a list of them to the BBC Languages Department at Caversham, but they could identify none of them. This is the children's party tape, the only one of Philip's tapes that survives. This is only because it was recorded at a Bufora meeting, so it is a several times copy and has background hum as the original was too low volume. Also, it was in pieces as Philip played parts separately with comments in between, so it had to be reconstructed to make it. The tape seems to have important translations of extraterrestrial language. Sputnik Anya Pardu was taken as a translation because of a correlation in a song by Bernard Byron. Similarly, Nyanapoda is translated as God be praised. Yadu Pardu is also translated as we are in orbit from previous messages. 2 weeks after the children's party, I picked up the same young boy shouting Yabahusita. Following that came a very amorous sounding lady saying Missima, followed by a self-conscious giggle. Later I got a man saying Missisi. The syllable nia, as in piano, it occurs in at least 3 words recorded. In addition to Nyanapoda, we have Nyanapuzi and Yabanyana. Early one morning we picked up a man saying Hiroshadu. About 3 months later, when in Shrewsbury, Shropshire, about 80 miles from home, when staying with a friend, UFO author Gavin Gibbons, came the voice of possibly the same man saying Hirashidu Czech. Apparently the change of vowel alters the meaning of the word. On another occasion, a group of boys and girls shouted Driota, followed by a female giggle. There are a great many more words on my tapes. Easter 1958 was a time I remember when it seemed that on each occasion I switched on my machine, something new and exciting was recorded. Shortly after this, I received a visit from a Mr. John Musgrave, a BBC engineer who was fascinated by my recordings and completely baffled by many of them. Using a battery portable, far better than my Grundig, he placed his microphone on one side of the windowsill, and I put mine on the other. We recorded simultaneously, and both picked up the identical signals, though his were stronger and clearer than mine. This recording culminated with the voice of a small girl shouting, "Hello!" Some weeks later I had a visit from the BBC's Tonight camera team, with Alan Wicker, who spent all day filming interviews with myself and friends. When John Musgrave came out with some remark doubting the interplanetary origin of my signals, the voice of an irate young lady appeared on my tape, ticking him off severely. However, the BBC team were about 30 feet away, and nothing appeared on their soundtrack. One of my recordings certainly seems to show that they were rebroadcasting the first performance by the BBC of Lennox Berkeley's An Overture. After a considerable rumpus going on for half an hour, one hears a voice say, "Quiet now, it's on," and thereafter not another word is heard, and the music begins. Although the Children's Party is the only surviving recording, we do have a transcript of the Overture tape. The single word overture appeared on a recording. Mr. Rodgers heard that an overture by Lennox Berkeley was to be broadcast as part of the BBC midday concert hour the next day. Re-examination of the tape showed a faint "an" before overture, and also "he only wrote one." An original decision to copy the concert directly from the radio changed after a friend's telepathic message. Use normal method and start early. Radio on, but not too loud. Voices, appearing to come mainly from two men and a woman, start about 15 minutes before the concert. Philip Rodgers, time 11:30. Woman, space. Second man, I'd say 5 to 1. Philip Rodgers, sorry, 11:45. Man, indistinguishable. Beautiful whistled motif, very loud, clear and musical. Man singing in monotonous descending chromatic phrase, minor, minor, for 5 minutes or so. First man, excited. Got home service on, how are you? Not clear, maybe can do. Second man, good. First man, want your name on the... Unintelligible. Second man, it's on home service. First man, right, from space. Metallic male voice, how's tricks? Few minutes pause. Second man, space. Take part in air arm. Yava Niana Donova, ionosphere. Another man, I've gone, and followed by a long whistle. Jonskala, yes, you touch. Indistinct pause. You've jammed it. Go on. Woman, quickly, he's shifting in time-space. Second man, shut up. This man speaks with a Yorkshire accent, which becomes very broad for these two words, making them rhyme with book. Man, sotto voce, my stoicranx is stuck. Second man, space. First man, sarcasm, good old Einstein. Modernistic musical phrase, play it on some kind of xylophone. Men singing, nasal tone, put your feet down. Overture is now introduced on the radio. It's on. Go ahead. Very quiet. Don't talk, please. 2 seconds later, the opening chords of the overture are heard on the radio. No sounds are heard during the first 3 items of the concert, but during fourth, while Philip Rodgers is at lunch, loud rapid tapping on the microphone case, followed by some clanking noises. A little later, woman, use shortwaves, 0.12 Sidibularius, authoritatively. The Yon Scala was a small device which Philip was given instructions to build and was said to mean Earth-sky. Tony Wedd, a friend of Philip's, writes, to assist him in communications, he built a gadget he called the Yon Scala, which means Earth-sky. It was an incredible achievement for a near-blind person, with over 100 little parts of brass, aluminium, copper and stainless steel, including 2 crystals he picked up from the Yorkshire moors, where he got galena, pyrites, calcite and quartz. He bolted everything together, using no cheap solders, and hammered the parts into shape. The result was an object about the size of an orange, with a central projecting spindle ending in a thumb piece. He noticed two special properties. It would flip over onto its side and it was warm to hold. By modifying the circuit one way, he built the S1, a little flying disc. Another way he got the formula for the Rosswinger, a pair of shoe soles about an inch thick on which he simply rested his feet, as there seemed no point in building on the leather uppers to make complete boots. The effect was as good as sitting by a kilowatt bar fire. This design was particularly meant to benefit his mother, who suffered from arthritis and poor circulation. This is the plan for the Rosswinger. Use the YouTube pause button to examine it at your leisure. For the full story of Philip Rodgers' tape recordings, their indications regarding extraterrestrial language, and his work on the Rosswinger free energy device, see the Voices from Space website at this URL.